How's it going, everybody? My name is Box from Box and Jackalope, and today we're going to talk about the new Resident Evil 3 remake. So let me preface this video with the fact that I've only ever played Resident Evil 4 and 5, and I really enjoyed the two of them. Nemesis was always a character that I was super interested in learning about, and 3 always looked like a really interesting title to me. I never played the Resident Evil 2 remake, but when 3 was announced, I was totally on board. So please bear in mind, these thoughts are from a very casual fan. Later on in the video, we will talk to N7 Spectre Shepherd, a very hardcore Resident Evil fan, and get his perspective on the game. And to just warn you guys, there will be spoilers in this review, so please click off if you don't want to hear any spoilers. So the story of Resident Evil 3 takes place during the Raccoon City outbreak. The game has a stellar introduction, setting up the universe and characters very well. You control Jill Valentine and Carlos throughout the game, and Nemesis, in my opinion, has a hell of a presence. Although most of his encounters are scripted, your first playthrough it's very easy to get immersed, and you really have this feeling that he's hunting you throughout the whole game. Jill and Carlos were likable protagonists. In fact, if they ever led a future Resident Evil game, I would be a-okay with that. Honestly, my whole playthrough of this game, I can't help but feel really sorry for everything that poor Jill has to go through. From the opening minutes, Jill is constantly stalked by Nemesis. This doesn't stop until the credits roll, and you can really hear the pain in her voice at times from this. She also has some pretty funny one-liners throughout the game, and her interactions with other characters, I think, are very natural and flow very well. I would say as a protagonist, Jill is a very strong character, and I can definitely see why she's a character that's pretty loved by the fanbase from what I understand. I don't know if this is a reimagining of her character either from previous games, but as a newcomer to the series, Jill was a great protagonist. Okay, so I will say one of the biggest surprises of this game was how great of a character Carlos was. Carlos just had such a likable personality, and by the end of the game you'll know what I mean without getting into too many spoilers. One thing that separates Carlos from other Resident Evil characters is at the beginning of the game he's working for Umbrella. At the time he does this because he believes he can help people by doing this. Obviously as the story progresses he leaves Umbrella, but this is just a thing that makes him a little bit more distinct, I think, to other characters in the series. You really see this personality shine through Carlos as he really proves himself throughout the game. To put it bluntly, guys, like I said before, I would gladly play a spin-off game where Carlos takes the lead. Seriously, this guy is absolutely the man.
I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
Okay.
Okay, so Nemesis. Nemesis is an antagonist I will not forget for quite some time. From his badass design and his signature STARS one-liner, he's a pretty cool and terrifying dude. I enjoyed him more at the beginning of the game in his humanoid form, as funny enough, the more of a monster this guy becomes, the less scary he gets in my opinion. Each scripted encounter with him is fun and makes repeat playthroughs enjoyable. On your first playthrough, he gives you this pure feeling of dread, not knowing when he's going to pop out. Nemesis is what I like to call a determined villain. This guy does not give up, and that's something I really think is interesting about him. There's multiple points where it actually feels like he could just destroy Jill, but he's like kind of like a cat playing with their prey. It's pretty terrifying, actually. When you fight back at Nemesis, he drops weapon upgrades, which when you get more experience at the game becomes really good on repeat playthroughs. Great games always have great antagonists, and that is what Resident Evil 3 has. Nemesis is one of the most memorable villains, and he certainly left a big mark on me. Let's talk about Resident Evil 3's other antagonist, Nikolai. This guy is such an asshole, but that's what makes him also a great villain. He is sneaky, shady, and downright unlikable, which is perfect for the role he's given. Overall, I don't have too much to say about this guy, other than he's a good addition to the already great cast of characters in this game. And that includes the minor characters too. Without spoiling anything in this aspect, a lot of the minor characters are great in Resident Evil 3. I really think you guys will enjoy the storyline here. You really get the feeling that you are constantly on the move. You get that feeling through the way the game is paced. There's never a dull moment in Raccoon City, and when the game slows down, you really feel it in a good way. A nice moment to rest up before, well, Nemesis appears with a rocket launcher or flamethrower, whatever he has to throw at you this time. I found the gameplay here to be absolutely stellar. Well, yes, I think more randomized Nemesis encounters would have been great. Each place you visit had a slightly different mechanic that made each level feel fresh, and didn't really feel like there was any padding. Carlos's segments reminded me more of Resident Evil 4 and 5, while Jill's felt more like traditional survival horror, which was a nice way to honestly pace out the game. Another fun mechanic that's in this game is the dodge mechanic for Jill. It really makes you think how you want to address certain situations. Do you want to try and dodge a zombie and get through, or do you want to take them all down? That's what makes this game really fun on multiple playthroughs. Carlos gets something similar with a parry ability. I think this one's fun, but Jill's is just, I don't know why, in my opinion, more fun to play with. The zombies give you this pure feeling of anxiety and dread every time you see them. Sometimes you may want to dodge them, and other times you may just want to blow them up in one go. This kind of variety makes the game feel fresh and fun on multiple playthroughs, which we'll get to that. So the length of Resident Evil 3. My first playthrough was about 7.5 hours. That's because I am horrible at the game. I could see a veteran player getting through this game their first time about 4 to 5 hours. Now keep in mind, this game certainly feels like it's designed for speedrunners in multiple playthroughs. Upon your first completion, you unlock the shop, which allows you to buy cosmetic items and new weapons. You can get certain items earlier in the game. For a good example is you can get your lockpick through the shop, so you don't actually have to wait till a certain point in the story to get it, allowing you to get other items earlier in the game. This can help you complete higher difficulties easier or breeze through normal difficulty. It's really awesome. To add to the replay value, you also can unlock various different concept arts, you can look at different models in the game, and I really like it when a game includes stuff like this. More incentive to replay. This is absolutely great. This has kept me playing, and I'm currently playing through hardcore right now. I have a high incentive to go back and get all these collectibles. The last thing related to the gameplay I'd like to talk about is the exploration. This game encourages you to explore the city, and it rewards you with ammo, first aid spray, anything you could think of, even little extra story tidbits. This is nice, and it encourages you to learn the lay of the land, and this is something that can help you on multiple playthroughs. You know the Nemesis flamethrower segment's coming up, so you want to have lots of herb spray, lots of explosives, and lots of stuff to take the guy down. Overall, before we get to the interview with N7 Spectre Shepard, I will safely say I can highly recommend this game if you're interested. I think it's a super fun game. Although it's a bit short, I think the gameplay more than makes up for it, and the story was really fun in this game as well. So anyway, let's hop on into that interview. Hey, what's going on, everybody? So I said at the beginning of the video we were going to be talking to a veteran Resident Evil player about his thoughts on Resident Evil 3. I'm joined by special guest N7 Spectre Shepard. He speedruns Resident Evil games on Twitch. He plays through them. But he's got a lot of experience with the franchise that I don't have. But yeah, welcome, Dylan. Appreciate you being on.
Yeah, no, not a problem. As someone, like you said, that speedruns streams and overall writes articles about Resident Evil pretty much for a job now. Pretty well versed in the content of this video, so definitely happy to be here.
So, there's a few things I wanted to ask you about in particular for criticisms I've seen of the game, and I wanted to kind of hear your perspective on it, because I never played the original Resident Evil 3. I really liked this one. Like, I'd actually consider this my favorite Resident Evil game, like, out of the 3 I've played. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on Nemesis. Did you wish he was a little bit more unscripted, or did you enjoy the more scripted nature of him in this game compared to the original? Because I never played the original, but I heard a lot of fans say that he was like unscripted, it would appear more. And I believe in Inferno he does that in this game, but I wanted to hear your thoughts.
So with Nemesis in this one, I'll say my first playthrough on hardcore, which is what I started the game on. That was my first playthrough completely fresh. I loved Nemesis in that first playthrough because I didn't know the scripted parts. So it, you know, with a blind eye to it, you don't know when he's gonna pop up. However, speedrunning it and going subsequent playthroughs of it, that's where you get into that habit of like, okay, I know exactly when to stock up and when I'm going to fight Nemesis. He's gonna pop up after I do the substation, so let's make sure I have a couple of hand grenades. Things like that. So I loved it my first playthrough, but when you continue, the unscripted nature is a little bit kind of boring. However, like you were saying, with Nightmare and Inferno, honestly, if you go from hardcore to Nightmare, the game changes. They change item locations, they change enemy placements, they change Nemesis into where he is more aggressive. To the point where in Inferno, his speed is actually increased. It's just so he will run faster. Right. And he comes at you way harder. So I really like that. But in regards to playing the original to this Nemesis, Nemesis in the original the biggest thing was he showed up more, even though some of the points you did know when he was going to show up if you played the game multiple times. He showed up more, but they also had the live choice system where you made choices, and that actually dictated later on where Nemesis would show up. So in subsequent playthroughs, you would make different choices and your replayability went up because you assume Nemesis is going to be one spot. He's in a different now. So
yeah, no. So like, I was actually telling Jackie about this, and earlier in the review I stated, on the first playthrough, it's really easy to get immersed in this game, because there's a big feeling that you're always being hunted by him throughout, like, the whole game, and the game just doesn't... One thing I really enjoy about the tone of this game is you just kind of keep moving, you don't really stop. Like, it feels like there's non-stop action, which I really enjoy. That's something I really liked about Resident Evil 5 when I played it all those years ago. And there is this feeling that you're being hunted the whole time. I could tell you this, I was playing it the other night, and my girlfriend Jackalope was watching me play it, and it's that part where you're going up the ladder and Nemesis grabs Joe by the skull.
You by the head
she didn't know about it. She's like, oh my god! But I think the first playthrough is certainly the strongest story-wise, like if you haven't done it.
Yeah.
That's actually interesting to hear your thoughts about it. I almost wonder if they'd be able to patch something in like that at some point. Which actually brings me to another point that I wanted to ask you about. The length of the game. This game certainly feels like it's made to be played through multiple times. I really like the fact that when you beat the game, you unlock that little shop, and you have incentive to go do challenges, get the little bobbleheads, get all the weapon upgrades, everything. It's really nice. It's kept me playing after my first playthrough on normal. But I basically wanted to ask you, what were your thoughts on the length? Because I heard a lot of people saying this game was short. But on the flip side of that, I didn't play the original one, but I heard from a lot of people the original Resident Evil 3 was short as well, and that was a criticism of the original game. So I wanted to hear what you thought about that.
Yeah, so it's weird because if we think about the development cycle of the original RE3 and this one, they actually kind of mirror each other in a weird, eerie kind of way. Because with RE3 originally, yes, it was actually just a spin-off. It wasn't supposed to be a main title game. However, they went through making it and they're like, you know what, we're just going to have, it's going to be faster pace. It's just going to be a little more action. You're going to play as Jill and you're going to be exploring Raccoon City. That basically was the premise. They didn't really want to go too far into it. And they wanted Code Veronica to be 3.
Right.
But Code Veronica was so wildly different because it was not in Raccoon City. It was on a different island. It was on Rockfort Island. Didn't have really many connections to Raccoon City other than playing as Claire. So they basically had to backpedal that and say, all right, that's the spinoff. This is going to be 3. And then they were rushed to do things to make it longer. They added Mercenaries mode, and they were just reusing assets from Resident Evil 2. Yes, they updated the polygons for characters and zombies. You could have more zombies on screen in the original, but they just reused the RPD and just basically made us like cut off some doors. So it's like, okay, you're going to be able to access half of what you did in RE2, but whatever, it makes the game longer. Now, with that being said about the original one, with this development cycle, they were making Resident Evil 2 Remake, and they were making 3 basically at the same time. The problem that happened is RE2 Remake got leaked, and they basically, like, they were similar games, but because they were having different people go on them, they were like, okay, we got to push 2 out, but whoever's on 3, like, just keep doing what you're doing. Try not to be influenced by 2. So there were some design choices, like the knife and grenades being self-defense items in 2, and then in 3, they're not self-defense items, and you don't even have an option to get out of a grab. It's only the mashing, which is what it was in the original.
Oh my god, the dodge mechanic's really fun too.
Yeah, and they added the dodge mechanic like in the original as well. So it's odd that they kind of had the same thing where it's like they had to just riff off of 2, and they ended up reusing the RPD, things like that. But they didn't want RE3 to be honestly its own game. They were actually supposed to come out pretty much together as like the Raccoon City experience. So it was supposed to be because 2 and 3 coincide story-wise, and you were
Right,
supposed to
right.
play 2, then 3, and get a full experience of Raccoon City. They wanted them to come out basically together,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they came out so shortly after one another, and that's why you can get a bundle of both of them for like $80. It's like both of the games together.
Yeah.
Um, but that's why it's kind of short, is because it's like you're supposed to be comparing it with 2 as like one experience, not as individual stories.
Right. And I think like the story the game tells is actually really good in my opinion.
Mhm.
There's a lot of games where there's side characters that feel like they don't matter, but like this game, like the stakes just feel really high, and like I don't know, the side characters I found interesting. But speaking of characters, Dylan, I wanted to
Mhm.
ask you something because when I played this game, Joe and Carlos I thought were two really really good leads in this game.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, do you think we could see either of them again in a potential spin-off game at some point? Especially considering, I think this game, I heard in the original a criticism was Carlos was kind of boring, but this game made him a lot
Yeah.
better. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Carlos in the original was kind of boring. He was a little just kind of macho man. Like that's all he was really supposed to be there for.
Hmm.
And he was honestly kind of just like no one liked him. He was basically a stand-in for Chris Redfield. That was basically the Walmart version. Like it wasn't like it. No one liked him. This game though, right off the bat, from the first interaction with him,
Hmm.
where he shoots Nemesis with the rocket, saves Jill, and she's like, "Oh, who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Carlos. I'm saving you," and just like pulls her away. He's so optimistic in this game, and he's so like, "I am just trying to help people." He didn't join Umbrella because he wanted to be this person that would kill a bunch of civilians with a bio weapon.
Hmm.
He honestly joined them because he wanted to help.
That's why he feels so
Jill,
betrayed by it afterwards.
yeah, exactly. Jill kind of like lets it go that he's with Umbrella after a little while because he proves himself. But in the game, like honestly, they fleshed out his character a lot more,
Hmm.
and he doesn't come off as such a like a bland character. At the
Right.
beginning, he kind of seems like a generic kind of jock, whatever, because he is just kind of saying like, "Oh, don't you like that in a man?" Like stuff like that. Um, but you can tell it's just like his way of like, I'm in a horrible situation, and I'm literally just trying to like lessen the
Help.
tension between everybody, because that's like his first line when you get when Nikolai and her are like going at it for a second. He's like,
Right.
"Hey, we're all on the same team." Like he literally is there to stop the tension from building. And I love that in his character. So I would love to see him in a spinoff. I would love him to continue in the story. It just sucks that after 3, they don't touch on him anymore, and Jill goes off to be in basically after 3. There's a thing with her and Chris that they go off to an Umbrella um, research facility in Umbrella Chronicles, like
Hmm.
that game on the Wii. And then after that, it's Resident Evil Revelations and 5 and so on and so forth. And Carlos was just thrown to the side of characters that have never been mentioned again.
Right. So yeah, no, like the okay. So when I was playing this game, because I had no idea about the storyline, the whole game I was like, they're gonna kill this guy off. They're gonna kill him off. Like, don't kill Carl. Especially after the scene with the zombie horde coming into the hospital. I'm
Yeah.
like, they cannot kill this guy. He's so selfless and stuff. But like, yeah, awesome character. If they, I feel like they could do a spinoff with him as the lead. To be honest, with what they've fleshed out here, um, I'd be cool with that. Um, so the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's more related to gameplay. Do you think the gameplay here was better or equal to RE2 in terms of speed running? Like, what would you prefer? Because I never played Resident Evil 2. I actually would like to after playing this one. Love to hear
Yeah,
your
I
thoughts.
highly suggest to play 2 now that you've played 3, because you'll get some of the behind the scenes story, um, especially with the RPD.
Mhm.
It's really cool because like Carlos sees the 2 guys die, the 2 police officers, and you see those
Right.
bodies in RE2, but they've
Mhm.
been there for a while when Leon sees them. So, anyway, with that being said, with the mechanics, so speedrunning 2 is an odd challenge because it's all about sequencing with the keys, and really trying to learn how to get around what creatures can you ignore, what creatures can you not ignore, and stocking up on the self-defense items.
Right.
It's honestly a weird mindset, because when you're playing 2, your knives are destructible. They will break. You don't have an unlimited one. And your flashes and your frag grenades, when you get bit, you can basically stick it like in the zombie's mouth.
Oh, wow.
And it'll either blow up the zombie's head or it'll flash and blind everyone. So when you're playing, you have that in mind. That's how you get around hordes. That's your saving grace. In this one, you don't have that. You're throwing your flash grenade if you know there's a bunch of zombies, or you're using the dodge mechanic.
Dodge mechanic's so fun. So fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
And it's all about getting that basically mindset of, okay, I need to modify my playstyle if I'm speedrunning RE2 Remake or RE3 Remake. It's honestly like it's a weird shift, but I love the dodge mechanic, and I actually think speedrunning Resident Evil 3 is way easier than Resident Evil 2. Reasoning being that dodge mechanic is there, and the puzzles are not too involved in the point where you don't actually need to worry about a lot of sequencing, like you did in Resident Evil 2.
They were really easy for a guy like me to figure out, of all people. Like, I suck at puzzles in video games. So Dylan, one thing that I've noticed, and I've seen a lot of people say, is there's some content cut from this game, specifically the clock tower area, and I believe there was a graveyard segment. Would you like to, I guess, let the viewers know things that maybe you were disappointed that were cut, or stuff you think that would have been cool that was in the game?
Yeah, so with cut content, it's hard because they wanted to try to tell a more cohesive story, which the story is cohesive. However, it just basically lets down the diehard fans that wanted to see those areas come back. Because the clock tower is technically in the remake, but it's only the plaza in front of it, and you fight, Nemesis there, and that's the extent. That is it. That area in the game is so more involved, where you're going through it, doing puzzles as Jill, you get infected, and then as Carlos, you run all the way through the clock tower area to the hospital, back to the clock tower area, fighting Nemesis there, and then saving Jill. Having that not be there was a big letdown. And like you said, there's a graveyard area. There's also, there's the Raccoon Park, which is a whole park area that's right before there. And the thing is you fight a boss called Gravedigger. It's a giant worm. And the thing that was cool about that boss fight was it's the only boss in the game that's not Nemesis. So that's the only bosses in the remake is Nemesis constantly. Other than that, you don't have anything to kind of break it up. And it was not I wouldn't say change of pace, but it was like Nemesis is chasing you. You kind of finally he gets off your tail, but then you're fighting and dealing with a giant worm for a little bit, and then you're back to fighting Nemesis. So a lot of people were sad that the only other boss in the game got cut. And with Nemesis specifically too, with mentioning that Carlos fights him in the Clock 10 area, it honestly sucks that Carlos doesn't deal with Nemesis really.
Right. I thought that too was a little strange.
Yeah, he technically deals with him near the end when you're running around fighting him in the vat, like in the giant acid pool, and he's like, I'm gonna spot for you. That's literally it though. Other than that, like when you play as Carlos in the original, you deal with Nemesis a couple times where like you don't technically have to fight him, you can just run, but he's terrifying in that part. And it's cool that there was that interaction that Carlos would actually know about, and it just kind of sucks that they missed out on that opportunity. So
I feel like this game could benefit maybe from some DLC. I know Capcom does do DLC in a lot of their games, but I think in terms of like somebody like me, I didn't know any of this stuff, so I went in. I still really enjoyed the game, but I think it sounds like the game could really benefit from having this stuff. Like, I feel like they could easily add that as a free DLC or something, 6 months down the line.
They could definitely add the areas that people wanted. It would be a pretty good development cycle to make, complete new areas. what I honestly would like them to do, and I know this wouldn't please everyone, but I think it would be a compromise, is one of the main things that got cut was Mercenaries mode. And back then it was called Operation Mad Jackal. It wasn't just called Mercenaries. And it was, you played as Carlos, Nikolai, Mikhail, and Jill. And you could pick one of four. You had to get through this gauntlet of enemies, and it was basically like you had a bomb, like, in you. It was like stuck in you. And you needed to deliver an item to a mysterious person, and that's how you got points to buy items from the shop for your next game playthroughs. That's where they got the shop idea for the remake. What I would love them to do is if they did a free DLC like Ghost Survivors that they did with Resident Evil 2 Remake, and they made Mercenaries a mode, but they basically made the mode and the gauntlet you run through go through like the Raccoon Park and the Clock Tower, and like basically have the map for that not just be assets from the main game, have it be a whole different run that players that have played this game to death already can get that DLC and have a fresh experience.
I think if Capcom did something like this, they could not save the reputation of the game in some fans' eyes, but I think it would be a good move to please people, from what it sounds like, that were really hardcore fans of the original game. Because this is a unique perspective, I think, and it's interesting hearing from you some of the stuff that was cut, some of the gameplay issues, some of the other things. I think overall, for someone like me, this was a great game, and I think I'd still recommend somebody to go pick it up and play it. People can decide if the length is worth their buck. But I think overall it's still a really good game. I would love it if they did patch in a DLC where we get that stuff you were talking about, though, because I think they could take this game from a great game to like an outstanding game if they did something like that. I think that idea with the Mercenaries mode, that sounds like it'd be really fun. And they could even use, if they added that mode, they could reuse areas like the donut shop and stuff if they needed more maps or something.
Yeah, exactly. They could reuse areas, make the gauntlet longer. And the main thing is like all of the character models are in the game already.
Right.
You know, like the way the RE engine works is you can basically you can play as any of those models. It's like people mod those in. So like all you would have to do is be like, yeah, you're just gonna play as Nikolai. We already have the model. Boom, he's in there. Keep the same enemies, doesn't matter. Just make his inventory like it was in the original, where Nikolai only had a fucking knife. Like, Nikolai was the hardest one to do because of that. But
he triggers me in that game, by the way.
So him in that game is actually a lot better than in the original. I will say that. In the original, he was kind of just an ass. Like he just wasn't a nice guy.
Mustache twirler.
Yeah, and it wasn't really super fleshed out. Just kind of seemed generic, and the way he, spoiler, dies in the original is like it can happen in two different ways because of the scenario selection, but like one of them is just an off-camera nemesis like pulls him up through the roof and now he's dead and you get no resolution. It's not the really satisfying ending,
right?
Like RE3 Remake, where it's more like a like Jill gets the last laugh in that point. It's not just a random nemesis death. Like
that. Oh my god. So one thing too, before we sign off, the soundtrack in this game, especially the credits theme, I really like the credits theme at the end. But soundtrack was fucking stellar in this game. Excuse my language. It was really good. I mean, it really set the tone in a lot of spots, and I really like how the ending theme is more hopeful, like sounding.
Yes.
Like after everything, it makes you reminisce in the game. Good, great game.
Exactly.
So guys, I want to thank Dylan for being on today. Check him out on Twitch. He streams mostly Resident Evil, but he streams a lot of different games. You were streaming Final Fantasy VII Remake last night, I saw. I was creeping
pretty much any new game that comes out, I'll be streaming it.
You also do stuff for RE Declassified as a website, I believe. So,
Biohazard Declassified. Yep. If you go to my Twitch, there is a link right below it to their Facebook page. I do articles and I stream with them.
Perfect. Well, Dylan, thank you so much for being on today. Guys, I know this wasn't a World of Warcraft video, but I've really enjoyed Resident Evil 3. I think this is a pretty this is a pretty good discussion because you got a lot of perspectives. You got a scrub like me who took 8 hours to beat like a 4-hour game on my first playthrough.
Jesus.
And then you get the perspective of a hardcore fan. So whether you guys want to buy it, totally up to you. I'd say give it a go, and if the length worries you, wait for a price drop. But anyway, guys, we'll see you next time.